Before even getting into the details of the watch itself, I'll just say that it's somewhat of a miracle that the first Moscow watch factory that is now Vostok even survived at all. During World War II, or as they call it, the Great Patriotic War, the entire factory was threatened with being blown to smithereens by the Germans. So it was loaded up onto freight cars, barges, and even horseback over an ice road on its way to the relative middle of nowhere to Chistopol. During the war years, the factory produced things like tank clocks, fuses, and torpedo timers. But after the war, they began making watches again. And in 1965, the Ministry of Defense received their first order for a watch to be used for military commanders. As a field watch, it had to be dust-proof, shock-proof, water-resistant, and function well in cold or heat. The result is this watch, the Komandirskie. This one is the model 211306, Tank Commander's Watch, Body Style 21. One of the first questions many people ask is, what's the difference between a Komandirskie and the Amphibia dive watch that was released later? So let's get this out of the way right now. Originally, the distinctions were very clear and related to the mission for each watch. The Komandirskie being a field watch and the Amphibia being the diver's watch. The Komandirskie has a chrome-plated brass case versus the stainless steel case on an Amphibia. The Komandirskie has 2 mm thick acrylic glass versus 3 mm, a 0.5 mm caseback versus a 1 mm caseback, again on the originals, hand-winding movement versus an automatic movement, an unmarked bezel versus a marked diving bezel on the Amphibia, and finally, water resistance of 30 meters versus a water resistance of 100 meters. Nowadays, the specs have changed and these very firm distinctions are basically gone. Most Komandirskie are close to the original specs, this one is, but some models now have 100 meters or even 200 meters water resistance, they have automatic movements, and stainless steel cases. Some have a screw-down crown and some don't. So what's the difference? Well, these days, essentially, a Komandirskie is a Komandirskie if Vostok says it is. So without further ado, let's go to the watch itself. Now first the specs. This watch has a case made of chrome-plated brass, except for the back plate, which is cold-stamped stainless steel, 1.1 millimeters thick. That's more than twice the thickness of the 1965 version. And it has an obviously understated 20 meters water resistance. Being that this is a screw-down crown, and with the way it's made, I'd say it's probably good for 100, although I haven't tested it. But it's definitely better than 20, that's an understatement. The backplate of the watch is stamped with the Russian Imperial Eagle, and the description water resistant and dust resistant above the eagle in Cyrillic, and Russia underneath. The dial is made of painted cupronickel, that's copper nickel alloy, with non-radioactive phosphorilluminated dial markers. The movement in this watch, and I'll get to that later in detail, but it's the 17 joule 2414A movement, a classic Soviet watch movement, running at 19,800 beats per minute, hand winding with a 38-hour power reserve. Curiously, this watch has a bidirectional rotating bezel, even though the bezel doesn't have any dial markers and so you can't use it for anything. The reason is because some models of Komandirskie do have marks on the bezel that you can use for timing, and so this one still has that feature even though it's a plain bezel. The Vostok strap on this watch is pretty interesting. It's got the trademark pyramid raised padded platform in the middle, and the stitching is really thick and robust. Really good, strong quality leather, but as you can see, very crudely made, especially at the edges. So you can see where this is a military watch. This is not designed to be worn at dinner parties. this is a field watch made to be tough and to last. I quite like them. I sometimes buy these straps for other watches that are non-Vostok just because they're so durable. The glass on this watch is domed acrylic, a classic material for a 1950s, 1960s watch, which is the same as the plexiglass around a hockey rink. The advantage of acrylic is that you can smack it around with force and it won't break. Let me demonstrate how to wind this watch, because although this is a field watch, I'm unscrewing the crown here. It has a screw down crown similar to a dive watch. So you unscrew the crown, and then from that position you wind the watch. So just winding here. You can keep winding until it tightens. Don't worry about ruining the mainspring, because this is a modern mainspring and they don't break like the old ones do. So once it's wound, you screw the crown back on, or if you want to set the time, you pop it out a little further, and there we go, and then you can set the hours. Now, interestingly, to set the date, there is no third position. What you have to do is just cycle through. So I'm going through here, and once I get to midnight, this is noon, so nothing will happen. It still shows the 27th on the date indicator. And then when I get to the second 12 o'clock position, you'll see it'll switch over to 28. Now, if I want to make this faster, rather than go through the whole 24 hours, I can just skip back and forth between 10 and 2, and that'll advance the dates a little faster. If you look at the dots around the numbers, that's the lume. This is a field watch not really known for its lume, but it does have it. They're fairly small points, so they don't last a long time, about 15 or 20 minutes at most in my experience. But they look okay during that time. You can notice at the 12 o'clock it's got the double dot, so you can orient to the 12 in case you get a bit off kilter. That reference point is there. The lume, like I said, the points are small, so they're not going to give you an enhanced look on the dial in dim light like some dive watches do. They look quite unique in dim light, but it does work in the dark as a basic feature, and that's about all there is to say about it. Now, I have to say, I really like the way this watch wears. It's a 39mm case, so a classic case size that looks great on most people. Very thin, as you can see, with an 18mm strap and 18mm lugs with a padded strap, leather. So, fits really well, comfortable, really nice design. I just really like the way this wears and fits on the wrist. About half the citizens of Chistopol, the location of the Vostok watch factory, are descendants of the Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan, the Turkic Bashkir and the Kalmyks, who all conquered their way west from the steppes, plundering and pillaging along the way. The other half are descendants of the Rus, a Viking tribe that conquered its way east from Sweden, plundering and pillaging along the way. And it seems to me that this ethnic background provides some extra character and attitude that goes into the watch and even shows in the slogan of the Vostok watch. Now, this Komandirskie is a tanker's watch, but similar styles are also made for paratroopers, submariners, bombardiers, and others. So no matter what branch of the military you are or want to associate with, it's available.